So I'm Christy Terry. I'm the Director of Professional Development for the Division of Research. And I'd like to welcome Sarah Humfeld and Linda Blackus and their wonderful panel. I'm going to let them do their own introductions. And just a quick reminder that the Division of Research offers support for all kinds of fun things around grant writing and proposal development. So please contact us if you need any help. That's my little commercial. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Linda.
All right, great. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I am Linda Blackus. I'm the Director of the Office of Undergraduate Research. Joining me this morning is Sarah Humfield, Dr. Sarah Humfield, who is our Assistant Director. And if you work with our office a lot, another person you definitely would run into is Heather Turney, who is our Operations Manager. We have a few faculty that are going to serve on a panel and do a discussion and Q&A, but we do have a few commercials not commercials, just some information first. If you're not familiar with undergraduate research at MU or our office and the services we offer. So I think the first thing to note is that undergraduate research at MU is practiced in a variety of different ways. Students can support an ongoing faculty research project. They can do it on a volunteer basis. If you have startup funds, you can use that to pay them. You may have grant money. A student might have work study eligibility. And there are a number of different formal programs that a student can apply to. And there's information on a variety of different programs on our website. Faculty or students can do their own research projects as an offshoot of your project that you're doing. Students can earn academic credit when they get to the point where they're providing some intellectual contribution to the project. That is something that they work out between the department that's going to be giving them the credit, their faculty mentor, and themselves. Our office doesn't get involved with credit. So for example, if there's a biology student who's working with a nursing faculty member and they want to get biology credit for doing that research, they would work with the advisors in the biology department to get approval for that. The faculty member that they're working with would have to agree to it, and then everybody's good to go. And students can get paid and get credit at the same time. Some institutions have an issue with you can't get academic credit and get paid. That's not the case here. And then another way that students can be engaged in research is in classes that have research projects embedded into the curricular experience. So students can do any and all of these, and as faculty members, you can also do any of all of these. So interesting. Okay. So some things that our office is able to do, provide some consultation to you or to departments as you're thinking about starting undergraduate research programs or incorporating them into your grant proposals. We have a website where you can post opportunities. Our website also has a number of different listings of programs, activities, presentation opportunities, etc. We have a monthly newsletter that I encourage you all to sign up for. And if Sarah could put the link to the contact us tab so you can sign up while you're watching, that would be great. We do outreach, we have workshops, which we'll get to in a minute. We have a few programs that our office administers, but there are a number of other programs out there as well. Variety of different opportunities for students to present their work. The Visual Art and Design Showcase is coming up. We also have at the end of each semester what we call our class research project and poster presentation day. So if you have a class where projects are part of the assignment research projects, we offer a venue for your students to present. So they're not just presenting in their own classroom to each other, but they have a wider public audience. And then also our big events are the research forum. This year it's being incorporated into Show Me Research Week. And Sarah, if you could put the Show Me Research Week link in the chat, that'd be great. So that's another big event that we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about because we'd be here all day. One of the things that has really taken off since COVID is our workshop series that we do on Zoom for students. Faculty are always invited. You're welcome to attend. And so I would encourage you to check out our lineup of workshops. And if there are different topics that seem appropriate for students working in your research group, send them. You know, there's no reason that you have to teach them everything. For example, how to write an abstract, send them to that workshop. That'll give them some background. So that way you can help move them along that trajectory of writing an abstract without starting at the bottom of their knowledge. And if you have suggestions for workshops you'd like to see, please let us know. Students that attend 5 or more in a semester get a, we call it the STAR, the Student Training for Advancing Research, and they get a little sticker and we send their name to the deans and, you know, they can put it on their resume. So we do have a little bit of an incentive program for them. Again, these are all on Zoom, so easy for students to attend. I also want to make note of our summer program. In the summer, we have a rich array of programming, small group seminars, research compliance, training, orientation. This year, we're having 2 half-day professional mini conferences, lots of opportunity for community building. In the summer, in addition to MU students, there are a variety of programs that bring visiting students onto campus. And so if you are in a situation where you have a NSF REU site program or other methods of bringing on visiting students, please contact our office and we can let you know what we can do for you. If you have individual students that are working with you, MU or visiting, and you would like the students to participate in our summer activities, please contact us. We'll tell you what that involves. We'll tell you the cost. And then you and your student can determine if it's something that will enrich the student's experience, if they're going to be here for most of it. I think the activities are very good, both in terms of professional development for the student, as well as providing them this peer cohort of students that are doing similar things, going through the similar joys and frustrations of research. And it's a really nice support system for the students beyond their own research team. So something else that our office offers. Our website is here, although I know Sarah put that in the chat box. And we do a variety of social media things. Our generic email address is UGR, but you can also contact us directly. So today we have invited 3 faculty who are excellent mentors, experienced mentors, to talk about how they mentor and what they get out of it, how they strategize in terms of their own research, in terms of grant writing. We have a series of questions and prompts for them, but certainly we want questions from you all. What I'd like to do is I'm going to turn off the shared screen and ask Brett, Charlotte, and Chris to briefly introduce themselves and what their work is. And then we'll start around the room again and ask you each, how do you identify and recruit students to work with you as a starting point? So Brett, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Linda. I appreciate the introduction. So again, I'm Brett Ullery. I'm an associate professor over in the Department of Chemical and Biomedical Engineering in the College of Engineering. This is my 9th year on faculty here. I've always had undergrads involved in my research, and I'm excited to get to share kind of my experiences, and hopefully that gives you some things to think about on your side. Our research area is broadly focused on biomaterials, specifically for applications in regenerative medicine and immunology. So we do a lot of work with the vet school, the med school, the College of Liberal Arts. Actually, Charlotte's one of our collaborators. So even on this call, and same with Maggie Lang, I see is on here as well. So we have kind of a broad network of people we work with, and our undergrads get to really interface with a lot of different people in different spaces.
Great, thank you. Charlotte?
Yeah, I'm Charlotte Phillips, and I'm in, as you indicate, I'm in the Department of Biochemistry and Child Health. I am a School of Medicine faculty in biochemistry, but so basically, since Brett said how long he's been here, I've been here like over 27 years now, and so I've had a lot of undergrads in my laboratory working with my graduate students, and it's been a really positive experience. My research is in inherited musculoskeletal diseases. So we study muscle and bones primarily using animal models. And the structure of my lab is typically a couple of graduate students and then maybe 4 to 5 undergrads. And we tend to progress pretty well that way. And I'm very grateful for that team effort.
All right. Chris?
My name is Chris Josie. I'm a faculty fellow in the College of Arts and Science that's exploring undergraduate research, in particular across all of our units in Arts and Science, putting together a nice report on that we're going to present to everybody as soon as we finish it up. I've been doing undergraduate research since grad school, really. I've always had undergraduates involved in my personal research, and I have an ASH lab, which is sponsored through OUR and the Honors College, and I've been doing this now for at Mizzou 7 years, I think. Yeah.
Great, great. Brett, what have you found to be the best way to recruit and identify students to come work with you or elsewhere?
Yeah, thanks for giving that prompt. So I really had a strong interaction and relationship right when I started with our director of undergraduate studies and our advisors. I think that's a really important part of that. And doesn't necessarily mean your own academic program. Could be several academic programs, either you're related to or ones that are pools of students you might be interested in. So actually my first student that joined our lab started before I even came here. So through the Discovery Fellows program, there is a student and they had been selected in the spring before they had come. As some of you might be familiar with the program and administer it from the honor side. But when I had been offered a position here, the department chair said, hey, we have this Discovery Fellow. Are you interested in undergraduate research and having students? We connected, and I always like to say he's member 0. I'm member 1 of the lab. He actually predated me. He got here slightly before I did on campus. But we've had a strong relationship with the Discovery Fellows program. I think I'm now on my 9th student in the Discovery Fellows program in the 9-ish years that I've been here. So I think the strong connection with fellow faculty members and advisors who, they're the boots on the ground. They're the ones who get to see students and they hear if students are interested in research. Another opportunity is giving, kind of short presentations in the introductory classes. Like for us, that's our 1000 level class. These are freshmen in their first semester or 1050 in their second semester. And a lot of times those faculty will ask, hey, would somebody be willing to give a 10-minute presentation on their research, especially if they're interested in getting students, very early, freshman, sophomore year, students that might be able to participate in the Discovery Fellows program or other fellow programs that are offered, Churn Scholars over the summer. There's a lot of great programs through the Honors College to help facilitate those types of relationships and support for the student specifically. And so that's been the biggest way for recruitment. And then those students tend to recruit their friends or their fellow students in the classroom. So it's kind of those begot other relationships. So the positive experiences those students have seem to end up bringing in, other students beyond just the connections that I have through faculty and advisor.
Charlotte, things that you might do differently or in addition?
Well, I have to say, when it comes to having undergrads, in the Department of Biochemistry, and a high percentage of our undergrads who come in at least as freshmen, I would say 75% want to be physicians. And so they look for research labs because they see that as a checkbox. And so, that has positives and negatives actually for how this interaction works. But for the most part, graduate an opportunity. And I feel like the biggest thing about recruiting your student is the commitment level that when a student decides to come to a lab, because if you want it as a checkbox, it's not a bad thing. I'd like physicians to understand research and be critical thinkers, and that is like a hugely important thing. So I don't feel like that's a negative. What I feel like is not, for me, an undergraduate researcher, what I'm looking for is someone who has a commitment to help on a project, recognizing that it's a two-way street for both of us and for the graduate students in my lab. So when we ask for like reliability, like even if you're volunteering initially, that when you say you want to do it, you show up when you're going to show up. And those kind of things are really critical. And so I've used Discovery Fellows, awesome program. And we have Kaffner, which has an undergraduate research fellowship that is available to students, work study students. I mean, but the big thing is is that level of reliability. So when someone joins our lab initially, they learn a lot of basics, and I don't assign them to a graduate student, and I don't assign them to a project. What they're learning is like, how do we do things? And then when a relationship develops between the graduate student and the undergrad, where the graduate student fully trusts, wants to work with that undergrad, and undergrad wants to work with that graduate student, then we work out, usually identify a project that is a figure in a paper. We call it the one figure, because that's usually a very focused thing that a student can use. And that has been worked really well. When I assigned students to graduate students, was not a good plan. I found every now and then it's like that relationship actually hurt both of them, because the student the undergrad wasn't feeling trusted, so they weren't giving real support jobs or useful things, and the graduate student felt like they were babysitting. And so I'm making it sound like a negative thing, but it's not. It's like, how do you find those good fits? And so basically, most of the time I get lots of I get emails from students looking for labs. And so when I interview them and try to find out what they really want and what they're expecting, that helps. Because if it's a checkoff box, I've had students and it's been successful, where all they wanted to do was genotype, like something very focused, very steady, not research, which is okay. You just need to know what their purpose is and then work around that. So I didn't mean to take up so much time on this, but so they're really great students. And I've had students who come as freshmen and sophomores and juniors sometimes, but I've had freshmen who stayed in the lab for 4 years, and their relationship with the graduate student, and they're on multiple papers, it's like really bonded, and their research actually really goes forward.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the insight on the dynamics between the members of the research team, and we'll continue to get back to that. But before we do, I want to ask Chris, what do you think is the best way to identify students that might be superstar researchers and really contribute to your work and your team?
Well, I'm blessed in that I have some superstar researchers, and you ask basically anybody in the, I was just in a meeting with somebody from the Honors College the other day about a one read that I'm going to be doing next year. And I was just talking about my ASH lab and about how sad I'm going to be that I have students that are seniors and are the leaders of my lab, undergraduates, and I'm going to be losing 2 of them next year. and just throwing out one of the names, and they're like, oh yeah, of course, so-and-so, he's an all-star. And I go, oh yeah, and I'm also losing so-and-so. And they're like, oh my God, you have both of those in your lab. I'm like, yes. And so I say that to say that I'm blessed to have those students, but I also know that they didn't start off semester one as the rock stars that they are today. And so one of the things that I really pride myself on is being very intentional about my recruitment, because we know from the research, right, that in undergraduate research is a high impact activity for students, that the ones that can benefit the most from it aren't necessarily always the ones that are getting the opportunities, right? So underrepresented and first generation students, marginalized students. And so being intentional about making sure that not always is it the best practice to recruit undergraduates, just looking in your classroom and going, this person has an A, this person has an A, this person has an A, because there are structural biases already in place that may lead them to perform better. In our lab, we have a spreadsheet of people that apply to be part of our lab, and it's a scholarship-based lab. So just for that, in that, I try to take a more holistic approach to it, because a lot of students, and one of the things that we found, they're applying because they want the money, but several of them decided after year 1 or 2, this is cool, I want to go on to graduate school. And we don't have graduate students in our lab, it's an undergraduate only. So we've really taken great pains, and it's started to really pay off in year 4 of our lab, where we see undergraduate seniors taking over and leading meetings and truly being the ones that are acting almost as graduate students to the younger. It's sort of an apprenticeship, much like Charlotte was saying, natural mentorship that happens throughout there. But setting those high expectations that Brett was mentioning earlier for your lab, and Charlotte was mentioning, getting the buy-in and saying, this is exactly what we're holding you to. And as Linda likes to say, when an occasion happens, right, showing them an exit off-ramp, a graceful off-ramp, because sometimes they commit and, you know, they're not bad people, they're not bad students per se, they just overcommitted or that. And so having that graceful on-ramp, off-ramp, promoting an environment of inclusion for everybody, and an environment where students can be mentors themselves as they progress along, establish this culture of creativity that really thrives in my lab. But I think it really starts by looking under some rocks, right? Because they're not all going to be rock stars that first year. And so saying, I want a 3.9 GPA as the entry into my lab. Well, you need to look elsewhere and look at other activities they may be doing. Maybe they volunteered for their church and showed leadership in that direction, et cetera. Some things in the resume, maybe look just at their pure interest, because some students, I can say at least 2 or 3 that graduated and didn't start off as well as they could after freshman year. But if you look at their essay that they have to submit to become part of your lab, and I know in psychology, Nicole Campione Barr, who's a faculty fellow with me, does this sort of an application process to become part of your lab, looking at those materials and going, oh, this person is really passionate about X. Well, they may not have the highest GPA, but looking at all factors and looking at them more holistically, you open the opportunity up to others that you may not otherwise would have applied. Also, if there are certain individuals that you really want to reach and you're passionate about making sure that you have an inclusive environment, doing some outreach yourself, right? Going to various campus constituencies like we do to encourage them to apply to be part of your lab. And my lab is open across majors, so mine's a little bit weird in that way, but we have, even for disciplinary, if I were just looking for communication students, which is the department I'm homed in, I would look at and say, reaching out to various groups and say, are there communication students who may not be members of Lambda Pi Eta or Honor Society who would be interested in this? And just go into those groups, giving talks, sending emails, and putting things out on Canvas, right? We have a Canvas page for our major. And as the director of undergrad research for my major, I send things out there all the time. And I record a video that I give to all of our instructors and professors and say, please put this on your Canvas site. Please promote this to explain where undergrad research is going on, so that we don't fall into the same, because it's easy. And I've done it. I'm as guilty as anybody of saying, all right, I know this person is dependable because they were dependable in my class. I want them in my lab. But you can, with a little bit of extra work, you can really open it up to other people. So for me, just being intentional.
All right. I'm interested. I appreciate the comment about making sure you can provide students a graceful off-ramp if that comes. I'm wondering, aside from providing a graceful off-ramp, what kind of challenges have you had that of whatever sort in dealing with undergraduate research experiences, and how have you dealt with them?
That's a great question, Linda. I think, Chris kind of put it in a good place of like, sometimes we have expectations, right? Especially if a student has performed well in another area, whether it's a class, whether they've already been in another lab or something like that. And just being honest that they're still at a place where they're new, where they're getting their legs under them for as far as how to be professional, how to approach a project and things like that. I think Charlotte said of kind of an introductory period of let's get you with some general ideas of what it's like to be in the lab. I think the other thing that's helpful is, yes, the graceful off ramp, but I think Chris also said the graceful on ramp, right? Of some latitude of, okay, so we missed a meeting. What does that mean? Hey, let's talk about what we need to do to schedule to be more cognizant of the things that we do in our lab. I also think it's really important to build community. I think that's kind of come out in some of the comments that Charlotte and Chris have said, but I wanted to explicitly say, I think having a place where students come in and feel like they can grow, feel like they can get to know each other, I think is a really important part of trying to mitigate what can happen is if a student comes in and they're kind of maybe the only new member, everybody else has been here a year or two, and feeling maybe kind of left out, like they're not part of the inside joke, they're not the jokes, they're not part of the community. And so I think, making sure that you have, whether it's you individually or your grad students or your other more senior undergrads, like Chris mentioned, are taking that ownership to bring those students in can make a huge difference for trying to, mitigate as much as possible that other aspect that students might feel, especially if they're maybe first in family to go to college or from underrepresented groups and might already feeling a bit othered during their student experience, to then come into a lab where if they're also feeling that way, it might just compound. So I think we just try to be very intentional about, I like to say there's an in-lab mentor. So like for us, there's a person, a senior undergrad or grad student who's kind of helping them on board. Sometimes it's not even necessarily the person they're working with a lot on the research. It's just somebody that maybe shares a similar interest. They're both interested in med school or have a similar hobby that they're interested in. And just knowing that there's kind of a point person that they can go to if they need some support that's more in-lab focused versus just like a direct mentorship thing with me. So we still have that relationship, but it's kind of nice having the in-lab person and then myself, so they feel like, they really have two different people or more that they could readily go to try and, prevent that otherness or very minimize it when a student starts.
Charlotte, Chris, challenges that you've had and found a solution for, or are still searching for a solution?
I think some of the biggest challenges is first helping students identify, really like working with them while we're doing these different experiments, and like sometimes students don't know what they're not going to like doing, and it's not, I don't know that I call that a big challenge. It's like I try to, when we're introducing them to animal work or things like that, or lab work, I think it's always good to be in communication and for them to work with others who've already had experience. And so I think our biggest challenge is if someone doesn't follow through. And I know it seems like reliability shouldn't be, but part of my big emphasis when someone decides they want to join the lab and they're thinking about doing it, see, when we have such timed experiments and we have timed animals and it's not like, oh, well, I decided this afternoon I didn't want to come in. Or if you're in the middle of something and they're working with a graduate student and it takes longer than it should, we try our best, but we should like budget for that. But as they come in, to recognize that that's one of the problems with this kind of research, is that it's a really lot harder to do 2-hour windows, and that's my checkoff box, because I feel like and it's not necessarily bad. That's where you have to know what you want out of it, and you help the student find their place. But the part that's really difficult for like the team or the community is when someone says they'll be there and they're not. And even if you volunteer, it's like I do a lot of emphasizing the fact that it's kind of a privilege to get to work with the graduate students when they're starting to trust you to be a big part and you know, you're going, it messes up as, it can start, the mess up can happen as early as dishes. And if you don't wear gloves, when you're putting away the dishes, you can introduce RNases that can trash someone's experiment and those kinds of things. Now, I also, you know, am very big on it's okay to have something go wrong. And the most important thing to do is point out when it went wrong, because we're all good with that. And I usually list the things that when I'm introducing a student to this, it's like, okay, I have broke a pH meter probe in every lab I've ever been in, including my own. As a new assistant professor, I broke my pH meter probe. And you would think that after 8 pH meter probes, I would not have this problem, but I do. And I've had graduate students melt apparatuses and all kinds of things. So, but the important thing, or the samples got mixed up. The important thing is it's okay. Just, it's more important to share. You know, these aren't like, you know, don't be afraid, because you may end up discovering something we don't know. But anyway, I think the biggest challenges is the reliability probably issue has been, and not to fault them. We're really great about like, okay, look at your schedule, you know, when your exams are going to come, you know, I understand totally if you want, you know, because we actually ask who's available. We're sacrificing, and we have stations, and this, sorry if this is more detailed than people want to know, but you know, this person's getting the mouse for the heart, this person's getting the mouse for the leg muscles, this person's getting the mouse for the bone. And so do this well, and so it's helpful for the graduate students. They don't need everybody there, but you know, they need to know who's planning to and who's not. And I think that kind of camaraderie and being part of it is like the huge part, because we have these moments when and the graduate students will say, well, if you're not going to be there, that's okay. I just need to know, because it changes when I start things and stuff like that, or how many animals we can do.
All right. Challenges, Chris.
I think that Brett and Charlotte, you know, hit the nail right on the head. I wouldn't add too much outside of, I just would like to really highlight the last thing that Charlotte was saying, and completely agree wholeheartedly that one of the things, and Brett mentioned this earlier, that teaching them professionalism and communication, because I don't know if it's just being young or you know, maybe they are high achievers, and maybe the first bump that they hit in the road, they've never really learned how to handle, gosh, I can't meet this expectation right now as I'm learning my way into it. How do I communicate that I can't be there that day because I have this, or I didn't get this done 100%. I got it 99% done, but not 100%. And even high achieving honor students that are undergrads that have a 4.0 GPA are going to hit that at some point. And teaching them gracefully how to prevent further heartache by just communicating upfront and saying, being proactive in your communication, recognizing, yeah, I have 20% more to do. Please, you know, this on the other. So I in my lab, and I'm sure that Brett and Charlotte do, and theirs and their graduate students do as well, say that, hey, it happens to all of us. The number of times I've had to write to an editor and say, can I have another week on this review? Right. I can't count how many times I've done that, you know, this past year. Right. That just sort of that. I did see that Christine put in the chat, and I'll jump in on that real quick, since I think that Brett and Charlotte covered the challenges very well. Something that I actually have some data on. And so just to give you a little bit of data that I can't say that I'm to tell you definitively when the best time to involve undergraduates in your research may be, but I can tell you that the data from our faculty survey show or indicate that across the College of Arts and Science, the most common, it's kind of like the most common type is going to be assistant professors and full professors, with associate professors kind of like taking a hiatus from working with undergraduates. So it's an interesting trend. You would expect that post tenure that professors, that's when they would involve it. But it seems to me our best interpretation from the data is that assistant professors very much so are involved in doing helping undergraduates with research, or undergraduates assisting the professors in getting the research done so they can get tenure. And then once they have changed, they're maybe on act 2 of their philosophy, going up for full or achieving full. That seems to be when they get involved. But the greatest, at least in arts and science, the most participation with undergraduate research is at the assistant professor level, not at the full or the associate, which was actually a little surprising to Nicole Campione Bar and myself. But I can tell you that from my qualitative interviews with faculty members, the ones that are at the assistant level and that are, doing research with undergraduates, they really are approaching of it from what Brett and Charlotte and I have been talking about today of, you are responsible citizens. We're going to train you and you are a part of this larger project or part of these larger studies, and treating them as productive, members that are contributing and not necessarily as quote unquote, I know some may view as a burden or whatever, right? Treating them as you are aiding in my research trajectory while furthering your own, curriculum vitae and the graduate students. So it's mutually beneficial to all. And that to me is probably one of the best explanations as to why so many assistants are doing it. There's just more undergraduates than there are graduate students, and that can help you achieve your research agenda if you are careful and intentional, as Brett and Charlotte have been saying, with your efforts in your lab.
Brett, Charlotte, things to add to that. When do you recommend faculty start working with undergrads?
I mean, early and often, but I say that a little bit in jest, but I think, honestly, my own experience, like I said, I had my first undergrad starting in my lab before I even came here. My first year, I didn't have any grad students, so I actually had 6 undergrads. So it was something as far as an immediacy. I had always had a strong interest in this. Ever since I was a grad student, I had a number of undergrads that worked under me. I think similar to probably Charlotte and Chris's experience along those lines. So it was always something that I wanted to have, and it was an ability for us to really motivate getting the lab started quickly. And then many of those undergrads ended up transitioning to grad students in some ways in our laboratory. And not that that's, I have a very honest conversation about the pros and cons that come with that. I don't try to exclusively get all the great undergrads to stay in our lab, but if it's the right fit for the right student, and it can be a great opportunity for the laboratory. And so that ended up working out really well for us. And I think, as Chris said, the numbers here, we're not a University of Chicago, we're not a Caltech. There's not 2 to 3 times as many grad students as undergrads. It's the inverse, right? There's 3, 4, 5 times as many in some cases, depending on how you count them, of grad students, of undergrads to grad students. So, and we have students that are passionate, as Charlotte said, she's probably getting them knocking down her door all the time for different reasons, whether they're interested in grad or professional school, or in Chris's case, from the scholarship side and the program that comes with that and the prestige, that there's just a large population of them. So if you're able to identify the characteristics that are really valuable, then you can get a really quality experience. And I think one of the things I heard, and I really believe it personally, is I'd rather have a student who's incredibly passionate about what we do or an area of what we do than somebody who has a 4.0 GPA. Now, both is great, but the better predictor of success in the laboratory is that passion and excitement. The knowledge stuff we can help you learn, right? If you haven't had organic chemistry, we can work you through that enough to do stuff in the lab, or whether it's working with animals or other things that we do. If you hadn't had the biology, we can definitely mitigate that part, but we can't make you passionate about something you're not passionate about. And I tell students, that's okay. If you're interested in biofuels and you're not interested in biomaterials, that's okay. We can find a better fit for you. It's a rising tide raises all ships. We want you to be successful as a student, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in our lab to achieve that success.
Yeah, I really think that there's a lot of, because when I was teaching undergrads, I did an undergraduate course for a really long time, freshman one, and you would get students that would sometimes come to me later or were worried, oh, I didn't do so well in the class. But the students that, when I had like a list of students who wanted to join my lab, the student that went from the C+ to an A- when they realized they were struggling that first semester because it was like a change in how do I adapt or that kind of thing, that student was always attractive. And also, since I'm first generation too, I would always try to help students find as many ways to fund themselves, because you got students who can't do a volunteer in the lab if they want, even if they want to, because they just can't. I totally recognize that. But I do think it is a sense of community, because I looked at someone else had asked me to go through, I had like 70 undergrads who've worked in my labs because I'm old. And so I went through and actually looked at what happened to each one of them. And it was like, I'm a 33%. 33% basically went into medicine. Got med school. The other 30 some percent actually went into graduate school, and the other 30 like industry, different kinds of things. And so, I mean, it took a while to figure that out. But the thing is that I don't think our job is to help them find what they want to do, and you can't do that if you don't have a relationship. And I think the relationship with a graduate student as well is so much more beneficial than with me. And the ratio we tend to have is like, I think a 2-to-1 is an awfully good ratio, and you can pull in a third one, depending on how far in advance your more senior undergrad is. Typically, I mean, we do have some seniors that have their own project independent of a graduate student, but that typically what I have is like is that figure, because you can really own that question. And that I think empowers everyone, you know, when you own something. And so we like to encourage that.
Great. I want to make sure that people attending have an opportunity to ask questions. So putting something into chat or raising your hand would be a great thing to do. I wanted to ask you all, though, while we're waiting to see if there's other questions, how do you strategize juggling the resources you need to work with undergraduates? And those resources can be time, money, equipment, brain cells, whatever the case is. How do you juggle it to make it work for you and your research agenda?
Time is our most valuable commodity. You only get to use it once, and we all have a limited amount. So, I mean, that's where I try to really watch that ratio and involve my graduate students in whether they want us to take on, because who loses out is actually all the other students and the graduate student. If I'm not necessarily loses out, but you know, I've spread myself too thin to be a good mentor for any of them. And so, yeah, so it really depends on where your graduate students are at. For me, where my graduate students are at and where the undergrad's already in the lab. If it gets too big, we don't do very well. So that's the time is huge. Money is always an issue, but you know, with the lab resources and things like that. But we also I try to encourage all the undergrads to write for like Tafner fellowships and things like that. And we help them with all of those different opportunities.
I think Charlotte did a really good job of laying out that time is an important aspect, right? And I don't want to have a situation where I'm losing that ability to have that interpersonal relationship with each group member. So we got to one point, I have about 20 people in my group right now, pretty evenly split between grad student, med student, vet student, and undergrad. More often we've been in Charlotte's position, about a 1-to-2 relationship, just kind of ebbs and flows a little bit. Maybe to Chris's stats, I'm getting to the associate professor, a little bit of a lull, but still have about 8 or 9 undergraduate students in my group right now. But we got up to a point where we had, I think, 17 or 18, and I had about 32 people in my lab. And I feel like it got to a place where it was small things, but they were important to me. Like I would flip which students had a parent that did a specific job or had a certain number of siblings. And for me, that meant that I wasn't as close to them and was as tight of a relationship. So it got to a point where I felt like I wasn't giving each member quite the type of attention that I wanted to give them on the interpersonal relationship side. So I don't think we got to a point where, you know, there was kind of a revolt in the lab and, oh, Professor Ellery's never here and we don't have a connection. But it got to a point where I felt like I wasn't giving them quite my full attention because I just didn't have the time. And so that's kind of, we got to that peak of about 16, 17 undergraduate students, and then more often have been in about the 8 to 12 space. And then that's just the other side is managed with grad students for as far as numbers. But yeah, I think it's Charlotte, I think you did a great job of really saying it's that relationship and time, and that if you overextend yourself, you get to a place where everybody suffers a little to a decent amount. And we don't want that, right? Again, that idea that I think Sarah put it in the chat, the right fit, right? And that could even just be the right time. It might be a great fit, but I just don't have the time. I'm teaching a new course or trying to plan a new grant proposal, or we just don't have the right fit at the right time. And there might be opportunities and other labs that have similar cultures or similar research stuff that they're working on. And we can recommend those students go reach out to those other investigators.
Yeah, I think those are all, very much on point. So I won't repeat any of what Brett or Charlotte have said. I guess I'll just add to it beyond time, is that, unless you're very well heeled in your lab, as far as like having 50, 60, 70, 200,000 NSF money, right? To send your undergraduates to conferences and stuff. At times you're at a spot where they want to go and present your work at a conference, and your funds are going to get tight. So just establishing a culture of, the seniors get to go or the juniors get to go because it's good for their CV when they're applying to graduate school and whatnot, and establishing that culture where, expectations are clear. Like one of the things that we started this year, just because some of the work is getting ready to be pushed beyond just a couple of articles here and there. We've got enough data where we're getting ready to really start to put together some bigger things, and just explaining it and establishing what authorship looks like for undergraduates, right? So they don't know that just doing work in the lab that they're getting paid for automatically entitles them, without writing a single word, to authorship on something. That having sort of a clear compact and contract with them that says that if you want to be an author, you have to do this. If you want to be a first or second author, this is the expectation. And that sort of helps mitigate a lot of that. So they all know, oh, why is so-and-so an author and not me? And sort of managing that dynamic so it doesn't get strained. And it also helps explain to them when there are specific goals, and leaving it up to them, like, okay, we have, say, maybe $2,000 for travel this year that faculty co-mentor and I have, and we're going to devote it to anybody who wants to go, but we're going to then tier it based upon seniority. So for us, juggling resources really comes about in sort of that way. Thankfully, Linda's office and Heather have done a wonderful job this year in securing very inexpensive poster printing. So, that's not as much of an issue as it was in years past. So thank you to Linda, Sarah, and Heather for getting that going as far as that goes. But those are generally, as far as the resources outside of what Brett and Charlotte said with time, those are sort of the biggest things that I run into as far as juggling resources, just money to send people to regional, national conferences.
Yeah, I actually spend a fair amount of time watching for the WashU ones and the Kansas City ones, and the ones that opportunities for my students to present, because we can drive them. They'll drive to them, and it's like, this is a CV builder, that kind of thing. And there are opportunities like that, but it does take a bit of time. And then it's like, oh, now you got to edit another poster, but it's still it's a good thing. Yeah. But you're right. The cost, like national meetings on the East or West Coast, that's pretty difficult. And typically we can target more regional meetings that we can do that. We do that. But I don't have as big a group as either one of you guys, either Chris or Brett has.
All right. I have one more question to ask you, and I'll let you ponder this, and we'll see if there's any other questions that people have. I am interested in what is the biggest benefit for you in terms of working with undergraduates. And you can't say the relationships, the students, the seeing students grow. That's all wonderful. And you're all going to say that because you're all great mentors. But something totally outside the box that has surprised you about working with undergraduates. So ponder that.
So I'll jump in. I have something that is my boilerplate that I say. I feel academically, at least in my field, things are constantly changing as far as technology and certain social media, which is part of what we as communication scholars look at. They breathe life, right? I don't have to necessarily know the latest things on Instagram, TikTok, this, that, and the other. They keep you fresh, right? By saying, Dr. Josie, no one's on Instagram anymore. We're over here, right? And so they introduce you to things. And at least for me, I could cite one example, an undergrad who graduated is now at the University of Chicago in a sociology program up there, that developed because of her expertise and just, passion, as Brett and Charlotte have talked about, for something, really came through. And again, predictor of success here, what Brett was saying, she developed a scripts that automated things that used to take undergraduates that were working on it like 8 hours. And she developed a script to take care of it within Python, just because she was motivated and was tired of doing it herself. That that was tangible. That wasn't just the feels. That was somebody who developed something novel, original, that honestly grad students hadn't thought of at our department that are doing the same work. But this undergraduate student that had the time, that had motivation, and honestly was just frustrated with having to copy and paste and do things to get it into the right format for the statistical program to run it in R, right? Developed a script that saved hours. And so she's recorded videos, and every year when we're training people in now, we go to Della's videos and go, all right, cool, let's do this, right? And so rather than giving you sort of like, platitudes about how much I love them, and I do, and I'm going to miss them when they graduate, right? I'll just say that in a very real sense, that is something I would not have taken the time to do. It is something that I don't know if a graduate student with a graduate course load necessarily would have thought to take a time to do with all of their other stuff. But she did. It was a very real benefit to help move our research forward and save time that we now devote to other things.
Yeah, I don't know if I can top that. That's pretty awesome, Chris.
Yeah.
And I hope it doesn't come off as too platitude, but they keep me young. They keep me engaged in a way that, it's not to say that grad students don't, but I think Chris hit it where it's like grad students have a lot of other obligations that are very specific to their program. And that's really helpful for, leadership on research and having goals in mind and things like that. But like, I feel that there's a creativity that sometimes comes with the undergrads that they're just at that spot, right? They're new to a university, they're learning about themselves, and they're able to kind of bring that kind of energy to the laboratory. And so and to me too, right? I think you were saying, Linda, what do we get from it? I get to feel like, I'm living through their excitement sometimes, and I'm not trying to push too far into that, that rosy part, but like, I really do feel like I'm connected more to the community of Mizzou, the community of young people, and that exposes me to things that I wouldn't be exposed to, otherwise. I'd probably still be hanging out on Facebook, as Chris said, right? I might be too behind the trends, but in all honesty, they do bring this interesting creativity that when you pair that, like Charlotte had said, with grad students who maybe have the better structure, who know how that could, kind of focus that energy in something exciting in the lab or building community in our laboratory, that's something they can bring. And so having students at many different levels allow us to do that. Even just students going from first year to fourth or fifth year in the undergrad program, you see that difference and them bringing a new approach that can be, yes, a social aspect, but then also make huge dividends in building culture and new research directions.
I'm actually dittoing several of both of what you've said. Now, I've had undergrads who, because of they come in so fresh and their questions, and we're following a dogma, and they'll ask why we're doing it that way, or say, why can't you do it this way? They've actually really help you to back up and re-evaluate how strong the data was for something specifically. But my undergraduates are really the ones who've worked in the lab. When they contribute, they really are independent to a great, they had guidance, but then they take over this, and that figure would not be done. And when I mean a figure, that experimental design with all of the samples and processing, they're like major contributors. And so, and we do have a rule. You don't, just because you're doing something, you have to, if you do a figure, you do the figure, you do the methods, you do the results, you got to own the whole thing to be part of an authorship. But I just feel like they do bring in that energy. And the other thing is, and this is going to be the feely part, so forgive me, but I'm one of these people who actually love teaching freshmen and first year med students, because they're still going to save the world, and they're not cynical yet. And I just really enjoy that they're going to save the world. And then I enjoy also, and this is selfish, we set up an experiment, and before we look at the results, I get that moment to say, okay, do you realize that we are the only people right now who are going to know why this happens? And so every time I get to do that with a student, like wait to look at the gel and emphasize this, that's a very selfish and motivational and exciting time, because you don't get a lot of those, you know, and granted, we may be the only 3 people in the world who care right now, but you know, that kind of feedback is part of also the technology thing, because you know what, I'm never keeping up with the, okay, like the graphing. Oh gosh, they know not the graphing in the sense of I can do an Excel graph, but what I mean is we are now doing info abstracts and things like that, totally out of my wheelhouse. And then the student pops in, it's like, oh yeah, you use Prism, something. So yeah, they contribute there.
Excellent. All right, I think we'll leave it there. I thank you all for attending, and Charlotte, Chris, and Brett, bravo on a job well done. Christy, do you have anything to say to close things out for us?
No, but thank you very much for attending, and we are going to post a recording of this video on the Division of Research website, and we'll also provide it to Linda and Sarah so that they can post it as well. Appreciate your time, and I may very well be reaching out to some of our panelists to see if they want to talk to our early career fellows as well. So appreciate you very much. Thank you so much.
On a very final parting note, we have newly organized information specifically for faculty on our website. So I just threw that link in there. And also want to make sure everybody knows about a new student funding mechanism for undergraduate research. So I hope that people will look at those as well.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Have a
Thank you
good day,
so much.
everyone. Thank
Yeah.
you.